Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We talk a lot about cool business ideas on here, and today we're going to tackle something that's honestly essential for anyone who's thinking about, taking the plunge. We're diving deep into how to validate your business idea before you sink a ton of your time, energy, and of course, money into it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's exciting to have that light bulb
Oh
moment,
yeah.
right? But it's even more important to make sure your idea has legs before you go all in.
Exactly. We've all heard those stories, those cautionary tales of entrepreneurs who poured their heart and soul into something only to realize a little too late that, well, nobody really wants what they're selling.
Ugh, yeah, that's got to be the worst. I mean, we went through this super helpful article that walks you through the whole process step by step. And I think the big takeaway for me was how much wasted time, money, and frankly, just plain frustration you can avoid by doing things right from the start. Absolutely. And, we're also going to pull in some insights from real world examples, even
Hmm.
some book recommendations that can help you out on this journey. So think of this deep dive as your crash course in making those smart decisions from day one.
I love it. A crash course in not making those rookie mistakes.
Exactly. And, there's no better way to illustrate this than by looking at what happens when validation, well, kind of gets skipped. Remember Juicero.
Oh man, Juicero,
Yeah.
the poster child for like over-engineered solutions, right?
Whoa! I mean, they raised over $120 million in funding for this like super fancy high-tech juicing machine. It was sleek, it was connected, it was supposed to like revolutionize how we get our daily dose of fruits and veggies.
And on the surface, it seemed like a pretty solid idea. I mean, everyone's talking about health and wellness, cold-pressed juice is like super trendy. So where'd they go wrong?
Well, here's the kicker. For $400, you got this machine that basically just squeezed pre-packaged juice pouches. And it turns out people could just squeeze those pouches themselves with their own hands and get the exact same result.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that kind of takes the wind out of your sails, doesn't it? All that tech, all that investment, and in the end, it just didn't deliver any real unique value that people couldn't easily get elsewhere.
Right. And I think for anyone listening who's, got that entrepreneurial fire burning, that's a huge lesson. Like
Okay.
you really got to make sure that your solution is solving a problem in a way that's like genuinely better, more efficient, more convenient, something that people can't just replicate themselves.
Totally. I think that's where validation comes in. It's about making sure there's a real need for what you're offering. Not just, a cool gadget or a nice to have, but something people are actually willing to pay for because it solves a problem they have.
It's kind of like, building a house without checking if the ground underneath is stable. You might get a few floors up, but eventually the whole thing's going to come crashing down.
Exactly. So the first step, according to this article, and this makes a lot of sense to me, is market research. It's all about gathering the right intel before you even, start sketching out your logo or building a website.
Okay, so let's break this down. When we say market research, what are we actually talking about here?
So the first thing is really understanding your target audience. Who are the people who are most likely to need and crucially pay for what you're offering?
Right, not just like a general sense, but getting really specific.
Exactly. So you've got your demographics like age, gender, location, income level. These are super important because they give you a basic snapshot of who your potential customers are. But then you also have psychographics.
Okay, psychographics, I've heard that term before, but always get a little fuzzy on the details. What does that really mean?
It's all about understanding your audience's values, their interests, what motivates them, their pain points, like what keeps them up at night,
Yeah.
what are they struggling with that your product or service can help solve.
So you're really going beyond just like surface level demographics and getting into their heads.
Exactly. And once you have a handle on who you're targeting, then you can start looking at the competitive landscape.
Right, because chances are you're not the only one out there trying to solve this particular problem.
Exactly. So you really got to analyze your competition, figure out what they're doing well, where they might be falling short, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. This is going to help you figure out how to differentiate yourself, how to make your offering stand out.
It's like finding that sweet spot, right? Where
Yeah.
you can offer something unique that fills a gap that your competitors aren't addressing.
Exactly. And this is where keeping an eye on industry trends comes in. It's about understanding the broader market forces that are shaping your industry.
Okay, so we're not talking about like reading tea leaves or anything, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually like track these trends in a practical way?
There are some really amazing tools out there that can help you with this. Think Google Trends. It can show you what people are searching for online, what's gaining traction, and what's, maybe fading away. And platforms like Statista can give you a ton of data and reports across a wide range of industries.
So you can actually see what's hot and what's not and make sure your idea is aligned with, where the market's headed.
Exactly. And the article actually brings up a really great example of how this kind of research can lead to massive success. Airbnb.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about their early days. They started super small, right?
It's kind of crazy to think about it now, but they basically just started by renting out air mattresses in their own apartment during a conference. They saw that there was a need for more affordable, unique accommodations, and they just went for it with this super basic experiment.
And it obviously worked out pretty well for them. But I think what's so encouraging about that story is that it all started with a really simple test. They didn't need to, build a huge platform or spend a ton of money on marketing to validate their initial idea.
Right, and I think for anyone just starting out, that's a key takeaway. Start small, experiment, and see what kind of response you get.
Okay, so let's say you've done your market research. You've got a better understanding of your target audience, the competitive landscape, and the industry trends. What's next?
This is where it gets really interesting. Talking directly to potential customers. And this is where, honestly, you can get the most valuable insights.
Right. This article emphasizes that real conversations with real people are essential for validation.
Absolutely. And it suggests a few different ways you can go about this. Interviews, surveys, focus groups. It's all about getting that direct feedback from the people who are most likely to use your product or service.
Now, I think for some people, this can feel a little intimidating, right? Putting yourself out there, asking for feedback, but the payoff can be huge.
It can be game-changing. But the article also gives some really good tips for making the most of these interactions. And I think the first one is super important. Ask open-ended questions.
Okay, so not just do you like this, but what do you think about this? Or how would you use this?
Exactly. You don't want to lead people to tell you what you want to hear. You want to get their honest, unfiltered opinions.
Makes sense. What else?
The second tip might be a little tough for some entrepreneurs out there, especially those who are super passionate about their ideas.
Yeah.
Resist the urge to pitch.
Oh, yeah, that can be a hard one to resist.
Right. I mean, you're excited about your idea. You want to tell everyone about it. But at this stage, the goal is to listen, not to sell. You're trying to understand their needs, not convince them that they need your solution.
So it's more about active listening and less about giving a sales presentation.
Totally. And then the third tip is about testing your assumptions. You probably have some ideas about pricing, what features are most important, how easy it is to use. But these conversations are your chance to see if those assumptions align with what real people are actually thinking and feeling.
So it's like a reality check, right?
Yeah.
Making sure you're not just living in your own head.
Exactly. And there's a really cool example in the article about Dropbox. Drew Houston, the founder, he created this fake door landing page before they even built the actual product. Yeah. It basically just explained what Dropbox would do and asked people to sign up if they were interested.
Oh, I remember that. It was brilliant, actually.
Right. And they got this huge response, which was a really clear signal that there was a real demand for this kind of file syncing service, even though the product didn't even exist yet.
So that's a great example of low-cost, high-impact validation. You don't always need a fully functional product to gauge interest.
Absolutely. Now, once you've talked to some potential customers, gotten that initial feedback, the next step is to start bringing your idea to life, at least in a basic form. This is where the concept of a minimum viable product, or MVP, comes in.
Okay, MVP. We hear this term thrown around all the time. But for those who are new to this whole startup world, can you break down what it really means?
Basically, it's the most stripped-down version of your product or service that still solves the core problem for your target audience. It's not about bells and whistles or fancy features. It's about functionality.
So it's like the bare bones, the essential elements that allow people to actually experience the core value of your idea.
Exactly. And there are a few key benefits to launching an MVP. First, you get feedback way faster. You're not spending months, maybe years, developing something without knowing if it's even on the right track. Second, it minimizes your risk. If the MVP flops, well, you haven't invested everything into it. And third, even a basic MVP can be really powerful proof of concept if you're trying to get investors or partners on board.
It's like, hey, look, this thing actually works. People are using it. We're onto something here.
Exactly. And the article uses the story of Zappos to illustrate this.
Yeah.
Nick Swinmurn, the founder, He didn't start by building these huge warehouses and a complex online store.
Right. They started with a surprisingly simple approach, didn't they?
Oh yeah, it was super manual. He literally took pictures of shoes from local stores, posted them online, and if someone ordered a pair, he'd go buy them and ship them himself.
Wow. Talk about a lean operation.
Mm.
But it allowed him to validate the demand for buying shoes online without, like, making these huge upfront investments.
Exactly. It was a brilliant way to test the waters before diving in head first.
So you've got your MVP out there, you're getting feedback. But are there other ways to validate your idea even before you get to that stage?
Oh, absolutely. The article talks about the power of pre-selling and crowdfunding, which can be really effective for you. These methods are all about getting people to actually commit, to put their money where their mouth is before the product or service is even fully developed.
Okay, that's a pretty strong indicator of demand, right? If people are willing to pay for something that doesn't even exist yet.
It's a huge vote of confidence. And there are a bunch of benefits to this approach. It can generate revenue that you can then use to fund development. It helps you build a community of early adopters who are invested in your success. And it shows potential investors or partners that you have, real traction,
It's like, look, people are already lining up to buy this.
right? And they bring up the example of the Pebble smartwatch on Kickstarter. They were trying to raise like a relatively small amount of money, and they ended up getting over $10 million in pledges.
Wow, talk about exceeding expectations. But that's not just about the money,
Got
right?
it all. That campaign also helped them build a community of really passionate early users who provided super valuable feedback that shaped the final product.
So it's like a win-win. You get funding, you get validation, and you get a built-in group of like beta testers.
Precisely. Now, let's say you've got all this feedback, whether it's from an MVP, pre-sales, customer conversations, whatever. What do you actually do with it?
Right, because feedback is only useful if you actually like do something with it.
Exactly. And that's where the importance of analyzing feedback and iterating comes in. This isn't a one-and-done thing. It's an ongoing process. You got to really look at what people are saying, how they're using your product, and be willing to make changes based on what you learn.
So it's about being flexible, being open to the possibility that your initial idea might need some tweaking or maybe even a major overhaul.
Exactly. And the article has some good questions to ask yourself during this process. Does your product actually meet the needs of your target audience? Are there any consistent complaints or suggestions? What improvements can you make based on what you're hearing?
It's all about being honest with yourself and not getting so attached to your initial vision that you miss out on, making it even better.
Absolutely. And the example they give is Instagram. They started out as this app called Bourbon, which is a check-in app that also had a photo sharing feature.
Okay, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Because they realized pretty quickly that people weren't really using the app for check-ins.
Exactly. The photo sharing aspect, that was where all the engagement was.
Yeah.
So they made a really smart decision. They pivoted. They decided to focus on what was working and ditch what wasn't.
And that led to, well, the Instagram we know today,
Yeah.
which is a pretty good example of how being willing to adapt can lead to massive success.
Totally. Now, beyond just qualitative feedback, the article also talks about the importance of tracking your metrics. You got to look at the numbers.
Right, because data can tell a really powerful story.
Absolutely. And they specifically talk about these key performance indicators, or KPIs. These are the metrics that really give you a clear picture of how your business is performing.
They mention things like customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, churn rate, and conversion rates. Can you explain why these metrics are so important, especially in the context of validation?
Sure. Customer acquisition cost tells you how much it costs to get a new customer. Lifetime value is all about how much revenue you can expect from a single customer over their entire relationship with you. Churn rate measures how many customers you're losing over time. And conversion rate is about how effective you are at turning leads into paying customers.
So these metrics are basically giving you a really clear snapshot of the health of your business, right?
They tell you if your model is sustainable, if you're on the right track, where you need to make adjustments. They take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
It's like having a financial dashboard for your business so you can see exactly what's going on.
Exactly. And they highlight the story of HubSpot, which actually struggled for a bit in the beginning until they really dug into their metrics. They noticed that their free CRM was attracting a ton of users and driving a lot of engagement. So they decided to really focus on that free offering, which ended up fueling their growth.
So sometimes the data can reveal these like unexpected pathways to success.
For sure. It's about being data-driven, not just relying on your intuition. And to wrap things up, the article gives some book recommendations, which I always love. It's like a curated reading list for entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah, these are classics. Definitely worth checking out for anyone serious about building a successful business. So what's on the list?
Okay, first up, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Yeah.
This is like the Bible of the lean startup movement. It's all about testing your hypotheses, learning from your mistakes, and iterating quickly,
It's a must-read for anyone building a business in today's fast-paced world.
for sure. Then you've got Running Lean by Ash Moria, which is a more practical, hands-on guide to applying lean startup principles. It actually provides templates and frameworks you can use.
So it's like, okay, here's how to actually do this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which I love the title. It's all about how to conduct customer interviews in a way that gets you honest feedback, not just like what your mom would tell you.
Right, because moms are always super supportive, but you need that unvarnished truth to build a successful business.
Exactly. Then there's Peter Thiel's 0 to 1,
Yeah.
which is all about the importance of creating something truly new, not just iterating on what already exists.
So it's about being innovative, not just imitative.
Exactly. And finally, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey A. Moore, which focuses on the specific challenges of taking a disruptive product to a wider market.
So it's about scaling up, going from early adopters to the mainstream.
Exactly. And to bring it all back to the main point, validating your business idea isn't just a step you do at the beginning and then forget about it. It's an ongoing process that's essential for long-term success.
Right. It's not just about avoiding failure, it's about setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. And the key takeaway from this whole deep dive is that by taking the time to validate your idea, you're essentially reducing your risk. You're making sure that your idea has real merit before you invest a ton of time, energy, and money into it.
And that's a pretty valuable thing, right? To know that you're building something that people actually want and need.
Absolutely. And even after you launch, you'll keep getting feedback, making adjustments, and constantly refining your product or service based on what you learn.
It's like that quote from Steve Blank, "No business plan survives first contact with customers."
So true. It's a great reminder that the market is the ultimate test. You got to get out there, test your ideas in the real world, and be willing to adapt.
So for everyone listening who's got that great idea brewing, remember that validation isn't a hurdle to jump over. It's a journey, a process of learning and growing, and ultimately of building something that really resonates with people. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And good luck out there, entrepreneurs.
Till next time.